Good afternoon, everybody. This is the teaching video for our upcoming Simple Church gatherings on Sunday, February the 28th. Bringing this teaching video to you on Friday to give you a couple days to review it and come prepared for a time of discussion on Sunday. This is coming to you from Grace Church, and we say or express our identity and purpose this way, that because the Bible's grand story of God's creation and new creation focused on Jesus welcomes us to make it our story as well, we are a family of families who worship and follow Jesus as Lord by learning to think and live wisely together by His Spirit so that we can seek the welfare of our city and world in the way of Christ and His apostles. Hope you're all having a great week. I was encouraged to step out the door today to the backyard and to see the winter aconite. This is usually the first flower that comes up early in the spring, late winter, and there it is. I saw 2 or 3 of them coming up, so that's a good sign that we're turning a corner as the snow recedes. Some of the early flowers are starting to come up as well. So spring's upon us. As I said, our simple churches will be meeting on campus in person at 10 a.m. on Sunday, Zoom at noon. As a simple church, we'll be meeting too. So if you're not able to be with us at the 10 o'clock hour in person, for whatever reason, we always meet on those days as well at noon on Zoom. For those who have not been able to and had the ease of access to get out and to be with us in person for the time. So we'll be doing that this Sunday. Please come meet in one of our 4 simple churches. You've all been assigned to one, and if you're not clear on which one that is, please contact me, Steve, and I'll let you know. We're trying to establish those groups well because we'll be meeting in them even post-COVID time for some time. So we have these groups designed as a place where we can really get to know each other. And so I ask you to pray for one another and to be committed to the relationships within those groups. We call them simple churches because they're intended to function as small churches in and of themselves. And as we can meet together more regularly, we'll be sharing meals together in those groups and meeting and even just having some fun together in those things too. So please keep that in mind. And again, we will be meeting at Zoom at noon as well for those that are in that sort of temporary simple church right now until we are able to fully and freely and safely meet in person. Next week being the first weekend in March, it's our intention each month, even during this COVID time, to meet in person carefully, cautiously, but joyfully and gladly, Lord, in the larger gathering. So we'll be doing that next weekend. Sunday, that will be March 7th at 10 a.m. all together that next weekend, and the Zoom group joins us at that same time. So we're all in one time. We don't want to forget we're part of this larger family of families, but we have our smaller families in the simple churches. And going ahead, we'll continue to meet on Wednesday nights at 7 for Zoom. It's a great time for an hour, praying together in small groups and just chatting and getting to catch up with each other through the week. So also, again, please update any prayer requests. There's a form out there that you can update those things directly to our office, and that will be in an email that gets out to you, usually on Wednesday in the morning or by middle afternoon. So be aware of that. We're praying this month in February, and this will be our last Sunday to be focused on Lighthouse Pregnancy Resource Centers. Please pray for them. They have an upcoming virtual fundraiser. And notice this week that Doris and Larry Bird, who are liaisons to Lighthouse Pregnancy Resource Center in our area, got information out to you on that. So you can follow up with Doris on that. That's coming up pretty quickly as well. We are continuing on in our series of Luke and Acts as really the foundation of the New Testament and the opening of our story of what it means to be followers of Christ for us today. I've enjoyed those conversations, and we just finished a 2-week overview of the book of Acts, and we'll be looking at Acts in some separate videos in the weeks ahead. Beyond that, we're looking to begin first principle studies on Thursday nights. So that's where we're going with that for those of you who are looking forward to that. Keep an eye out for details about that, and we'll give you a good 2 or 3 weeks heads up so that you can be prepared for that. But this coming week, we'll be looking at Acts 1 to 7. So the first of the Bible Project videos on the book of Acts in their Luke Acts series. You can find that on their YouTube channel, but it will also be on our YouTube channel in a special playlist that I have created for each one of the video series that we've done. So as we go in time, more and more things are getting developed on our YouTube channel. All of the sermon series, the teaching videos are there. We're at this today is week number 20, so video number 20 is being posted there today after I've completed this, and a whole lot of other things. So that's a good place for resources, and we're learning how to use that well as we learn to master social media together and use it for purposes of becoming more established and even reaching out as a church community. So watch for that this coming week as well, the usual Tuesday study guide and preparation time for the Thursday night class at 7. I've entitled today's continuation of our series in 1 Peter, Knowing the Enemy Behind and the Grace Ahead. Peter is coming to a conclusion of his letter, and so we're trying to pull together the things that we've looked at and go back and look over notes, and probably in the week ahead, 2 weeks at the most, I'll be sort of summarizing all that we've looked at, bringing together all the summary statements that I've generated here, and hopefully you'll have a chance and we'll take the time to go back over notes and thoughts and really sort of cement the understanding and the thinking that you've done through 1 Peter that we've done together. And this is how God intends us to handle His Word as a community, learning to take it and understand it and then apply it into our lives today and engage one another in the learning process. So I'll flip through the usual introductory slides. They'll be part of the slide set that you can get through the link in the description below here on the YouTube video. And so you can read through those, and those can be helpful too, just to go back and reflect on from time to time. So again, we're working towards the end of 1 Peter in really the third part of the body of his letter, where he talks about suffering and future hope, after having talked about the new family identity of the church today, what it means to suffer as witness to Jesus, and then now to look forward to the future hope and really lay in the important things that need to be said amidst the realities of living in a world that's at conflict with God and His purposes. And you've seen that's been a repeating theme over and over again with Peter, because it's the situation of the church that he's writing to. And so there are things to learn there for us today. We may not find ourselves in situations like those early church are, or as brothers and sisters are around the world, and Peter makes mention of that in the passage today. But it prepares us, and we should be at least prepared in heart and mind, because things can change in a moment's notice. There are no guarantees that because of our culture or history or country that we live in, things cannot turn around. And it's wise to think through these things and to formulate in our hearts and our minds how we would live in any and every situation, much as the church has had to do over the centuries and will continue to have to do until Jesus returns. So we're looking at part 3 of the body of the letter, and we're invited here by Peter in general to remember that there's a real enemy behind what's going on, that we can't merely stop at, and believers should not merely stop at, an animosity with the culture or the people, whether it's formal or informal challenges or persecution, that the problem is much deeper and much more significant than that. And that's important, and we'll talk about why and encourage you to think about why as well, in terms of how we live effectively and faithfully as Christians day in and day out. Because, again, while we're at conflict with the world in many ways, and again, they can be in subtle ways and they can be in very direct and even categorical ways by official sources, we are at the same time on mission with Jesus to draw that world to him and to make him attractive to it. So there's the paradox. And that's what makes it so challenging for the church. But it's a unique challenge because only the people of God have this this sense of calling and sort of new perspective on the way things are because of what God has done in Jesus. And so it's great that God has included letters like Peter and the teaching of the apostles from that time to continue to help us and guide us and establish us today and make us strong in a world that continues to go down paths time and time and time again. Empires come and empires go, but they share some common characteristics as it goes with God and his purposes and his people. Again, just to skim through some of those, you can read on your own. This was a bridge from last week to today, where we talked about the importance of leadership and the work of shepherds, as well as the mutual humility that's needed in the church. I stated it this way, that leadership in the church is revealed in times of testing and trial because the true leader is focused on the follower and how they are presently doing in order to arrive together at the final destination. Leave no one behind, we might say. Jesus laid out this path to follow and in which to lead, not only in where it is going, but how to behave in the journey along the way. It is an ordered family with a purpose, and leadership is crucial always, but especially in the midst of hardship. The successful leader is measured by the condition of those who follow. So again, leadership is not about leadership. It's about the people who are following and caring and nurturing them like a shepherd does for sheep. And again, very, very important set of ideas that we have in that section of 1 Peter. Bridge commentary, this is coming from commentary on the passage we're looking at today, but it looks back on what we've looked at, and I thought it was, again, just helpful to bring our thinking into from last week into today, where the commentary says this: as Peter explained in the previous chapter, this fiery trial is there for us what the fire is there to do for us what the fire will do for silver and gold, to consume the imperfections and make the true metal shine the more brightly. That bright shining will consist of God's setting right of all things, eventually, as we know, and perhaps in various ways even in the present time. He will, quote unquote, establish and strengthen you, and quote unquote, set you on firm foundations. Many Christians, much of the time, feel insecure and wobbly in their faith. The promise of firm foundations is one to which we should cling with delight, especially as it is backed up by the promise that all power belongs to God himself. You ever feel insecure and wobbly in your faith? Probably early on you did, or at times, especially again in times of hardship and difficulty, where it looks like the whole world is against you or the whole world is going in another direction, and why are you remaining in this one? So just some good food for thought here. But as we approach the passage again, what's Peter talking about? What is he saying about this? Why is Peter saying this? This is some of the basic questions we approach any of our passages with, or any time we come to the scriptures, here specifically about Peter, but things to have in mind, because our job together is to get at the meaning the author intends, and these are questions that are helpful in doing that. So our verses today are this, 1 Peter 5:8-11. We're looking at the ideas in this section, this kind of a unit that we can isolate and look at together. Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Stand firm against him and be strong in your faith. Remember that your family of believers all over the world is going through the same kind of suffering you are. In his kindness, God called you to share in his eternal glory by means of Christ Jesus. So, after you have suffered a little while, he will restore, support, and strengthen you, and he will place you on a firm foundation. All power to him forever. Amen. And that again is from the New Living Translation. So how would you summarize this passage in your own words? Take a minute with pen and paper, or with the notes feature on your phone, or something that you would bring with you on Sunday, and say, okay, here's what I think he is saying. Here are the clues that I'm looking at, or the main ideas. I think he's saying this, excuse me, in my own words. That's an important step that will be really, really helpful for others as they hear the things that you are hearing with the help of the Spirit and with your intention to know the voice of Jesus and to follow him together with others. So would you take that time to do that? 5 minutes? Even just to capture a few thoughts and bring that with you on Sunday to be able to share it with others. So we asked some specific questions of this and I try to lay out some thoughts on this to help you in preparation for our time on Sunday. We might ask this first question: how does one stay alert against the devil? What are we talking about here? That's may have a lot of questions within it or a lot of fog to it. What are we talking about is, this is so far removed from what our culture tends to think about in terms of even the existence of the devil. What do we, who or what is he, and how does it impact our world? And we believe in God and we believe God is real and we know him in Jesus, but this shadowy figure that is referred to as the slanderer or the accuser, Peter names him and includes him directly here using the Greek term for him, and we obviously need to have a right kind of thinking about that. I pointed you earlier this week to the Spiritual Being series by the Bible Project. We looked through this on our Thursday night series back at the during the last year, and there is a video on the Satan and demons as a part of, I think, a 7-part series that gives you some of this background and understanding. So I encourage you to go and to look at that. Again, you'd look for the on the Bible Project website or on their YouTube channel, you'd look for the Spiritual Being series and find this video on the Satan and demons. Very, very helpful in understanding some of the background and some of the worldview that Peter has in mind here as he makes this exhortation and this final challenge to the believers then. But he says, stay alert. Stay alert. That's the first thing that I've highlighted here. Be aware. Don't be asleep. Don't be drowsy. Don't be, ignorant. Be alert and stay that way. Remain vigilant. In a state of caution, in a state of awareness, as a matter of all kinds of things. And his explanation here is, this is the great enemy. That's what you need to be looking for. We've talked about all of the things that you might be going through and the different challenges in culture, but in the end, this is the great enemy, the devil, the slanderer, the accuser. He is looking to swallow people whole. That's what he's saying here. And if it's not a hidden enemy for the believer. It's like if there was a lion walking around looking to attack people, everybody would know about it. And as Christians, we ought to be as aware as that about that, and not just that, but to stand firm. We'll look at that more in a couple of minutes here. But not only to remain alert, but then to take action. Have an awareness, but be ready to take action or to avoid the wrong kind of action in light of that reality. And it is a reality. It's a reality that as Christians we need to understand. It's very clearly here in the teaching of the apostles. Some commentary help on this. For most of the time in this letter, we've been aware of persecution coming from the surrounding non-Christian culture. Part of it will have been unofficial, simply involving ordinary people, sneering, criticizing, ostracizing, or using occasional violence. And often that's what persecution and hardship looks like for God's people. Some of it, though, will have been official, as the local authorities took a hand and made life difficult for the Christians. How easy it will have been, as it still is, for the Christians then to demonize their visible human opponents, to regard them as the real source of the problem. Now at last we see that this isn't the case. There is a real enemy. There's a greater enemy that's behind things. And so you can see how important that would be if we're in a world where people around us, officially and unofficially, are in opposition to Christ, but at the same time are victims of a greater power. And the important role we play in the midst of that, in following Christ and being loyal to Him, despite the attitudes and intentions of others, being people of prayer, holding on to Christ and doing that together, walking wisely in our various relationships. But in the end, recognizing that the real enemy is the one that God has ultimately come to defeat, because he's been the problem from the beginning and continues to be until He is completely dealt with by Jesus at His return. He's been dealt a death blow, but that means then we can take captives from him with God's help, or better to say that the Spirit can do that with our help. But again, you can see, just think about how in the flow of the letter what Peter's doing here to try to bring it to this ultimate understanding. But what does it mean to stand firm in light of all that Peter has said up to this point? He says these things: stand firm against him, and be strong in your faith. Because the devil is opposed to God. He is opposed to us because we are with God. We are with God in Jesus. And that, as we've looked at time and time again, but especially in a few passages back, is where our strength lies. It doesn't lie in us. It lies in our faith. It lies in our confidence, our reliance upon Jesus, not only what He has done, what He is doing in His presence with us and His plans and purposes for us, and what He will ultimately do. That is where our strength comes from. We have to rely on that strength, His strength, in order to stand firm. Firmness, resisting wind, resisting earthquake, resisting greater forces on the outside, is only overcome by strength on the inside, in the column or the building or the tree, whatever it may be, when those forces come. And this is a force that will be dealt with one day, but the inner strength is something that can always remain, because it finds its source in God. It's not something we have to conjure up ourselves. We can rely on Him, and even when it seems like we're going to break, we may just only bend so far, and things will return as they would. But even then, God was ultimately going to restore all things in the end. So he says that, and he also gives them a reminder that you're not in this alone. There is strength in numbers, and that is true in weakness too. And this is not something just happening to one group of people as if it's an exception or an anomaly. It's happened to the people of God throughout time, throughout history, and throughout culture in the world even today. And we have a solidarity that crosses all of those boundaries in Jesus. Peter, again, is speaking to a network of churches, not just to individuals or to even an individual local church, but rather a network of churches. They are to take encouragement and comfort and assurance that they're all in this together, and we're all going to progress together, because that's what God has designed the church to do. And that means we share these things in good times and in difficult times as well. And that thought alone ought to be comforting, and we ought to be mindful of what is going on in the lives of our brothers and sisters around the world. I think here of a conversation that we've had with Esther's brother David, who is now venturing out in church planting in a particularly challenging part of India, towards the northeast part of India, and to know that we are praying for him, that we're interested in him and the believers there, and the work as it progresses will be a comfort to them, to know that we're all in this together. And I'm sure vice versa, were we going through difficulties and challenges. I know in my conversations with leaders around the world, they ask how you're all doing. They ask how the Albanian churches are doing. especially when they hear about something that's happened here. That's a comforting thought, and we we don't want to forget that. And Peter reminds us here as well. A commentary on this, the thing that about recognizing the existence and power of the devil and learning to see him behind not only temptations to sin but also persecution and suffering, is that this enables you to take the position which the rest of the letter has been advocating. When 200 years ago many Western countries took a decisive move towards democracy, this was sometimes, not always, accompanied by a resolute dismissal of God or public religion from the civic and social stage. We were the masters now. We are enlightened people. We are free modern people. So the saying goes. But the danger with that has been apparent throughout the last 2 centuries, is that once you get rid of God, you get rid too of the devil, and then you yourself and your friends or your party or your country take the role of God while your enemies take the role of the devil, and that leads to disaster. That's a very interesting commentary on the way this needs to change our thinking. If we miss not only the fact that there is a great enemy, but because we've missed the fact that there is a God who is sovereign and who we all will answer to, then the battle becomes one amongst ourselves. And boy, can we see that playing out today among countries, among parties, among individuals, among families. When we remove God from the scene, we also forget that there's another enemy behind the scene, and the enemy then becomes amongst us without any other explanation or any other thought in it. So, again, just keep these things in mind. They have real implications in our world, and they're playing out around us right now. Another commentary on this says that Peter exhorts the Christians facing the devil to resist him, standing firm in the faith. Christians resist Satan by refusing to succumb to his temptations, to deny the Lord, and to be faithless and fearful in the midst of suffering. They can do this because you know that your brothers throughout the world are undergoing the same kind of sufferings. This expression makes it clear that Peter sees Satan's assault, his roaring and swallowing, as connected with physical persecution. He exhorts them, therefore, to remain faithful and obedient. Their encouragement comes from the worldwide family of God, for everywhere Christians are suffering to one degree or another, if we're faithfully following Jesus. And again, that will take different forms, some informal and more personal, and some official and sanctioned even by government. But it's all coming from the same source and has a real enemy behind it. He goes on in the next portion of our passage today to say that in his kindness, God has called you to share in his eternal glory by means of Christ Jesus. So after you've suffered a little while, he will restore, support, and strengthen you. He will place you on a firm foundation. All power to him forever. You see what I've highlighted there? The focus on God's kindness to us. You know, we're talking about his grace. We're talking about his eternal love, his everlasting love, his undying love that's motivated him not only to create all that there is, but to rescue it and to rescue us in his world. And so, you know, that's what we need. That's what we need to rely and rest on ultimately, his unending grace, and how he's made that known, and how he's made that available to us in Christ Jesus, and continues by his Spirit, and will ultimately do that through what he's going to do in the future. And therefore that he wills. He will, all power. These are the kind of things we need to tell ourselves and remind ourselves of regularly, over and over and over again. We cannot forget them, because it's not enough to recognize and stand firm against the enemy. We need to understand the overwhelming force and power that is available in God, and it's rooted in his grace and his ability to act on our behalf and act for those who love him and have given their whole being, their whole lives over to that grace for rescue, and find themselves in a new place with a new future. and a new enemy, or a true enemy that they now know and understand. But God, again, is the one who provides the strength in which we stand by faith. So what do we lose? What do we gain in the little while that we have to suffer? He tells you, you will have to suffer for a little while. There's no exhortation here to try to avoid it or walk away from it, to flee from it, but that you will. But it will only last for a time, and it won't be permanent. God will. All power is His. So He has the final say and the final word. And Peter's echoed that through his book from time to time, and we're seeing it here again in a really culminating kind of way. The whole letter has been insisting, on the contrary, that the way to respond to attacks of whatever sort is with a firm but gentle faith, treating non-Christians with respect, living within the law, except as an act when it tries to force you into denying Jesus. There are limits to that. Behaving with humility and patience in all circumstances. The point is this: the actual human opponents, even your fiercest persecutors, are not in fact the real enemy. There is a real enemy, and he will be using them. But if you resist him, staying resolute in faith and remembering that you are holding your bit of the line while your Christian brothers and sisters across the world are holding theirs, you will find that courteous and civil behavior, acting with respect and gentleness, will again and again win an answering respect from outsiders, even if they still don't understand what makes you tick. The power of love versus the love of power. That's the nature of the conflict here. The power of love versus the love of power. And Jesus' power of love will win every time, and we are now participants and agents of that as well. And so the call to live in this way. One of the most ennobling features of this text is that the God who called us to His eternal glory is indeed a God of grace. No matter what God has called us to do, whether that means living victoriously in some modern Christianized culture or living in the heat of suffering as the God of grace, He will bring us to the end He desires. We do not have to earn that final state, because as the God of grace, He has willed that it be ours. Big, big statement there. We do not have to worry about things, because as the God of grace, He has promised us eternal glory. When we are tempted to give up on the tasks that God has given us, we need to remind ourselves that our gracious God has appointed us to those tasks, and that He will give us strength and power until the end. Well said, and there I've highlighted it. So in summary today, 5:8-11, key part of our fruitfulness and mission with Jesus, even amidst opposition, is to know and recognize the true enemy behind suffering and persecution, yet living in hope and joy with confidence and perseverance, now in God's unmerited favor, which will one day also transform all that is wrong in and around us. That same grace is what all who are opposed to the good news of Jesus really need, just as we once did and still do. So as you think about coming together on Sunday, what lesson, insight, testimony, song, or other contribution from this teaching will you bring to the gathering this weekend? I put that question to you. I haven't asked that before, but that's essentially what I'm trying to stir up within you as you follow this. What lesson, insight, testimony, song, or other contribution will you bring to the gathering this weekend? That's the kind of active participation that we should all be encouraged to do and to be when we come together in our simple churches and in any time we come together. So some of the questions I'll leave you with to think about this. What happens if we ignore this enemy, or if we pay it too much attention? What's the wise middle ground of faith here? How and why does it help to know what's really going on behind the scenes? Why is that important? How should we be encouraged and strengthened by God's grace and kindness with an enemy like this? And then finally, maybe just this: what's your takeaway today? What are you walking away from this lesson and from our discussion on Sunday about these things? So some more insights on what it means to be at home with God, the home that He's going to transform or renew when Jesus returns. Because just as it was a letter to those churches then, it is about us and our work together today. So have a great rest of the weekend, and look forward to seeing you all on Sunday, 10 a.m. for our simple churches in person, and 12 p.m. for Zoom at noon this coming weekend. Lord bless you all.